Hello?
All right, hi everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Sorry about the bit of a delay in terms of setting up this event. Wasn't entirely sure if I was going to have time this week. We're just trying to get marking out. Hopefully we're going to get everyone's marks to them in time, but there is a bit of a backlog. So we're just trying to prioritize and make sure we're especially getting the module assignments out. So just so you know where kind of things are at the moment for us. In this video, I'll show you let me share my screen. And there you go. So this is what I'll be building today. I thought we'd do a calendar because it's the start of a new year. That's kind of a fun thing to build. What's important to note is that like everything's dynamic. The only thing that's not dynamic is the days of the week here, but I figured I could hard code those. But in terms of say January 2022, it's going to check what the month is and add that to the page and so on. I've offset the start of the numbered days to match up with the days of the week. I've also highlighted what day of the month it is, and you can create an event. So birthday party at 11:30 a.m. submit. It doesn't look so great on this. The issue on this thing is going to be responsiveness. I haven't dealt with that at all. And you can already see there that I have a problem in terms of responsiveness there. I'm mostly going to focus on the JavaScript of this thing rather than the responsiveness. It's a bit hard to make something like this. I mean, it is possible, but it is just a bit harder. So I'm going to work on it entirely kind of as a desktop thing, and then we can see. But I can go in and add other things. Gym. There it adds it. Fine. Okay, so let's get started with this. I'll start with a blank code pen. I got a question here. Do you use CodePen as your main coding tool or just for showcasing and teaching streams? I use CodePen fairly frequently to do small little things. So if a student sends me code and they want me to check it out, if they've just pasted it into Discord and sent it to me, then I'll just open a CodePen and just throw it in there. It's really useful for me just being able to work on something in isolation, quickly, small. What's nice also about it is that I have one page that I'm looking at while I'm coding for you guys. So rather than using Visual Studio Code, which is the main thing that I would use for writing actual code, but there I would have I'd have to have the browser and the code editor, whereas here I can just have kind of both in one. So it works well for me. I know most of the other teachers don't do this. They usually use VS Code and show it in the browser, but I've done it. Cool. So I've got an H1 and I'm going to style that. Just to say, if you're coming in as a January student, so the January intake has just come, some of this is going to be a little bit advanced for you, but hopefully it's still useful. So what I've done is I've created an empty H1. And what I want to do now is I want to get the date. So to do that, I can get the date, and I can use this constructor here of date like that. And let's console.log date to see what we get back. So if I look in the console, I can see there this date object. Can have a little bit of a better view of it in my proper console. But there you can see I get Wednesday, Jan 19 to 11:05 where I am. And it gives me kind of like a snapshot of time. But for our calendar, we only need to kind of know on a daily basis. So it's not such a big deal that like we don't have to keep checking the time, for example. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to update this H1. So I'm going to select that H1 and I'll go here on heading 1 equals document dot query selector H1. Just quickly, I'll quickly log that to the console, but most of us should be aware of kind of how you select an element from the DOM, hopefully. So there I've selected my H1, close that. You can see it's currently an empty H1. You can see it actually kind of just doesn't point to anything specific on the page. That's because the inner HTML there, as you can see, and inner text is just an empty string. If I had to change that, need to look at the newly logged one. And there I could see that the, that the inner HTML, inner text there is whatever it's in there. But I'm going to dynamically add this to the page. So I'm going to go ahead and say, oh, whoops. I want to get the year. So let me just pull that down. I want to get the month. So I'll say first, I'll say const this month is date dot get month. And we can console log that. And you can see it says 0. So what's happening there? Okay, so I've asked for the date. And when I got the date, it told me that it's like Wednesday, January, whatever. But if I use the .get month method, what actually gets returned is a number, and it's the number in an array. So hopefully you'll know that an array starts at position 0. So if we have an array for my array, Tom, Bob, Susan, console.log my array. You look in the console here. See, there's an array. The item at position 0 is Tom, position 1 is Bob, and position 2 is Susan. So an array starts its numbering at 0. And January is the 0th month in the year. So it's at position 0, then February at position 1, then March at position 2. So even though we think of it as the first month of the year, it's actually at position 0. Okay, hopefully we've got that. So what I actually need to do is I need to create an array. I've already gone and done this. I'm not going to go and force you to watch me do this. It would be incredibly tedious. But what I've done is I've created a variable called year, and I set the month to January, and I've also set how many days are in that month. I think I haven't done a check to see whether it's a leap year or not. Again, there's only so much I can do within an hour. So yeah, you would have to do a check to see if it's a leap year and then change how many days February has. But let's just guess it's going to be a normal year. I prefer to have things dynamic, but we can only do so much. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this here. And so now I know what number in this array. So if I console log year, take a look at the console here. The item at position 0 is January, and I can see that it is 31 days. There's a question, will you share the code pen after? Sure, I can share the code pen. My only apprehension about sharing code pens is then sometimes I just see my own code in submissions. but I'm happy for you to play around with my code. So that's great. Then there's another question. As a fresh student with little knowledge about coding, is it standard to code JavaScript first and then do the rest or not? Okay, so I could have written January 2022 in here. And then I could go ahead and style this. So I could say whatever. So I could do that and then later go ahead and take all of this out. But it makes more sense to me to just get what I want on the page first and then worry about the styling later. When you start with coding, you'll first just be working with HTML and CSS, and you won't be doing any JavaScript, so you won't be adding JavaScript stuff to the page. But this very much depends on JavaScript to be able to be dynamic. I can't hard code January 2022. Otherwise, every month I would have to go and change that, which just isn't helpful. Cool. So I've console logged year, and if I use square brackets and I say the item at position 0, let's see what I get in my console. I get January and days 31. Again, this 0 is not dynamic, so what I want is this month. And there I get my January 31 back, but I can also use dot notation. There's a question. Can you explain what you mean by dynamic? Okay, so if I had to have written this in here, so January 2022, like that would now be hard coded into the page. This is doing no check to see what the actual month and year is. What I want to be doing is I want to go ahead and check and actually see what the month is. So let's say in 2 weeks' time, if this code had to run on a web page, it would still say January 2022, even though the month has changed to February. So what we want to do is we want our code to be constantly relevant and true. And so we need to do a check each time we run this page to go and check what the month is. We can't write it hard coded into the page. Again, if I had to write year 0, that would be hard coded. Then every time this code ran, it would only log out the first item in the year array. But I wanted to log out whatever item in the year array the month actually is. So when this runs in February, it should log out the item at position 1 and so on. Okay. So I can get that, and I can say, I can use dot notation. So I can say dot month, and it logs out January. If I say dot days, tells me that it is 31. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just remove this here. And we can go and write heading 1 dot inner HTML equals year this month dot month. So there it says now January, and it's dynamically doing that based on what the date is. So another question. I'm sorry for these questions. What I meant with my questions is that I thought that you always write HTML first and fill the page with the content, which you then style with CSS and then to Java to make it interactable. Is that not always the case? Just one note there is that it is JavaScript, so Java is a different language. Annoyingly, they decided to name the two things the same or very similar names. So, well, in this case, I almost don't want anything to be written. The only thing that I have written on my page is just the days of the month, because everything is dynamic in this case. So I'll never know for sure how many days there are in the month that this code is going to run. I'll never know for sure what month of the year it's going to run. So everything has to be written dynamically in this case, because it's a calendar and it's always changing. If this was a contact form, I would write all my inputs and I'd write everything for my contact form in my HTML. I'd style it, and then I would do validation using JavaScript. All right, hopefully that's covered that. Can you please explain briefly the difference between const, let, and var, and when should we use them? Thank you. Cool. So I'm using const here because when this runs, I want it to just be constant and I don't want it to change. The reason you use let is if you want the value of something to change. So you'll probably be familiar with a for loop. For var I equals 0, I is less than 4, I plus plus. Console.log I. All right, so if here goes ahead and runs 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now if I had to change this to a const, it's going to give this error, type error, invalid assignment to const I. So in this case, it's throwing an error because it's saying that you've said that this I is actually going to stay constant, but here you've actually updated the value of I. You can't update the value of a constant. It must be constant. You can't now change the value. But if I use let, it runs fine because it's just saying you can let it be equal to this, but don't worry if that changes. So hopefully that explains the difference. Var is an older kind of catch-all before we had const or let. So we didn't always have const or let, and var was just a way of being able to create a variable, but it makes more sense if we're clear about whether this variable can change or whether it can't change. And if it can change, it should be a let. If it shouldn't change, keep it a const. Cool. So we got heading 1.inner HTML this month. I want to add it as a add the year as well. So I'll add the month and I'll get the year as well. So it's this year and it's get full year. One line. Okay, so now I see that I'm getting January 2022. And the one thing with this constructor is if I don't set a date, it gets the date for today, but I can also hard code one in. So I could say March 30, 2023. And it now dynamically goes based on the fact that I've created a date variable, a date object, and it now changes what gets displayed on the page. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of it being dynamic. But I just need today's date, which is January 2022. Okay. The next thing I want to do is I want to have a section here. Let's call it div class of calendar. And I want to add to the calendar the days of however many days are in that month. Okay, so say var I equals 0, I is less than the days of the month. But it's not month, it's dot days. I plus plus. Okay, so just to quickly show you what's happening there is I'm going to get this value here, 31. So I know that I need to add 31 items to the page. If this was in February, I would need to add 28 items to the page and so on. So let's quickly select this calendar. Say calendar.container.inner HTML. It's plus equals and I'll have a div to give it a class of day. And we'll add in I. There, it's gone ahead and started. You can see it adds it at position 0. So it starts at 0 and it runs to 30. So that's not really what I want. Actually, I want this to start at 1. So I'm actually not going to have my var I equals 0. I'll have it equal to 1. So now it starts at 1, 1, 2, 3, and runs all the way to 30. Again, that's not quite what I want. What I actually want is I want to make sure that it gets that last item as well. So I'll say less than equal. Now it goes ahead and adds all of those all the way to 31. So it now adds all 31 days. Again, if this had to be, I'm going to change this and I'll say February 21, 2022. It now says February 22, and you can see it only runs to 28. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of it being dynamic. Okay. Let's add some styling now for that, just so we can have that looking good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll say dot calendar can display flex. Set it to flex wrap. I'll add a gap of 10 pixels. And then for my day, I'll set that to flex 0, 0. It's 180 pixels. And let's add a background light blue. And we can add some padding. 10 pixels. Set a min height 100 pixels. So there we've got our days of the month added to our page. We haven't yet added what days of the month. Sorry, I meant to say what days of the month we've got. Is that 2, 4, 6? That's not quite right. There we go. So that now gives me 7 on each line, which is correct. And now I'm going to go ahead and add the days of the week. So I'll say add div. I'll just copy, paste this in so we don't waste time. So we've got our weekdays, and it starts at Sunday, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, like that. And I'll go ahead here and add weekdays. Set that to display flex. And then I'll say in just the weekday div, then set that to flex 0, 0, 160 pixels. And this should have a gap of 10 pixels. So I just wanted to kind of match up. And I want us to add a okay. So there they match up now. The difficulty, of course, is that Sunday, the 1st of January was not a Sunday. The 1st of January was a Saturday. So now we need to get and figure out where to actually place this first item. Okay. So what we can do for that is we can go ahead and let's check what day the first day of the month was. So we'll say const first day of the month. To do that, I'm going to use the date constructor again. As I've shown before, you can add in a string to tell you which day of the month or to create a new date. And in this case, I'm just going to hard code one in for now, and we'll make it dynamic. January 1, 2022. Look in the console here. First day of the month. It's a bit long, isn't it? If I look in my console, I can see here that it's created this date object for me. And it tells me that it was a Saturday, Jan the 1st, 2022. So I now know that Jan the 1st was a Saturday. Now what I can do is I'll say here, day offset is equal to first day of the month dot get day. And then let's see what the value of this day offset is. Have a look in the console. And the value of that is 6. Saturday is the 6th day in the array of days. Okay. And that's really useful for us because that tells us how many we actually need to offset. So what I've done is I've created another for loop here. So for I equals 0, I is less than day offset, I plus plus, and I'm going to go ahead to this calendar container. And I'm just going to add some empty days. Class equals day. So I wanted to have the same styling as day, but I also wanted to have the styling of empty day, which I'm going to add some styling to. And you can see it goes ahead and creates a whole bunch of empty divs so that when my the for loop for adding to the page only starts on the Saturday. Right, hopefully that's come across, but basically what I've done is I've just made sure that I've created a whole bunch of empty days before the real days actually start getting added. I'll just add some styling here for the empty day. And I'll add a background of gray. Now this might not work. Let's see what happens. It doesn't actually apply the gray. So let's have a look and see why. So here's my console. My dev tools. And there I can see styling for day, and then I can see styling for empty day, but my background gray doesn't get applied. And I can click this here and it highlights where it has been applied. And you can see here that the styling for day gets added, but empty day doesn't. And this has to do with the order in which we write our CSS. So this actually needs to be placed below day. And there I get my gray. So that's just something to remember and think about just in terms of the order in which things are written. I'm just going to go ahead and I'll pick a nicer color here. I've got this gray here. That looks just a bit nicer. And so we're pretty far into this. The next thing to do would just be to add the day of the month. So let's do that. What we can do is we can get the day of the month. So let's get this day. So we've got this month, this year, let's get this day. do it in order, maybe that makes sense. This day equals date dot get date. We'll console log that so we can see what the value is. Remember to be console logging as you work. It's really quite important. And here it tells me that it's 19. So I know it's the 19th. So then I can go ahead and write an if statement. So I'll say if I equals this day, then instead of adding just day, I mean, this is a bit of a hack way of doing it, but day else, it's probably a nicer way of doing this, but I think you get the point of what I'm trying to do here. And so I'll just style it today. And again, make sure it's after day. So now it gets styled correctly there. But let's see again, let's talk about, we were talking about dynamic. So let's add a new date into this get date. And actually you first make this dynamic. So first day of the month, I said new date, January 1, 2022. So that's not dynamic. So this won't always work. So I need to make this dynamic. And what I could do there is I know this month. So I can get January by using this exact variable there. So I'll say January 1, and then I need to get the year. This year. So I'm just looking for the first day of that month, right? So I can hard code in 1 because I needed to know which is the first day. But now if I try a different date, let's try here a new date, and we can try August 22, 2025. Okay, so it tells me that the first day of August is a Friday, and there it says the 22nd. So if I look, this might take ages to go. Why did I make it so far in the future? Sorry, that was a bit of a silly decision, but there. Friday 1 is now on the correct day. We can change this. Let's make it September 2nd, 2022, just to keep it easy for ourselves. 2022 starts on a Thursday. Let's have a look. September starts on a Thursday. Okay. So that's all getting dynamically added. Just in terms of styling, let's just add a font. I got a font of Google Fonts, which I can add here. And let's just add that to the body. It's incredible how just a font makes something look so much nicer. And certainly something I'd encourage you to make sure that you are using fonts, and make sure you set a font on the body element, please. I often find there's like little bits of Times New Roman that creeps in. So best to avoid that. Okay, the next little thing that I wanted to do, hopefully we won't spend too much time on this because we have done sessions on this fairly in depth. I don't know, should we stop it there? I can go ahead and show how to do the adding events, but maybe it's better if there's questions. I don't know. If there's other things that you'd like me to cover, the adding the events is really just there's on click, open a form, get the user to submit it. It's not that unique, but is there Q&A questions that I could handle? Otherwise, I'll go ahead and show the adding events. Can I explain the flex shorthand 00160 pixels? Cool, I'll start with that one. So flex, if I had to set this to flex 1, you would see it displays all of them in one line like that. And there's just not enough space for all of them. If I had to say increase this padding to say 30 pixels, it would force more over. But it just flexes to try and take up the minimum space that it kind of needs. I will send it. Yeah, I can send it now if you really want. It's going to change as I work. So sorry, if I have 00160 pixels, this first one is setting the flex grow. So how much space to take up. I'll show you quickly what happens if I set that to 1. So it takes up the available space, which is great, apart from the final row, which gets a problem because this now starts growing too much. And I don't really like how that gets styled. So that it doesn't flex grow, I set it to 0. And now you can see it doesn't grow to take up the available space. The next thing is flex shrink. So it doesn't shrink. And then finally, it sets flex basis. And this is the base size that this thing should be. And I've set it here to be 160 pixels. If I had to increase this to 200 pixels, you can see I'll open in my and see that the size becomes 200 pixels. But that doesn't work if I want to have 7 on one row. So that's why I set it to 160. Cool. Hopefully that's explained that. The next thing, if you want to start the week on Monday, can you just change the order of the hard-coded list in HTML? The difficulty there, well, so what you could do is I'm trying to think. So you would need this number to be different. So if I had to, let's see if I can get it to work quick. Let's try. And I'm going to keep it at this date, our current date, just to make it easier. And this offset would need to be increased +1, I think. Is that, am I thinking of that logically correctly? Clearly not. Maybe -1. Okay, I need to think about that a little more. If other people have suggestions on doing that, then yeah. The difficulty is that the browser has its own array that it's imagining that you're using starting on Saturday. There might be a way to be able to change that though. Cool. Sorry, why is this not working now? So I've changed something and it's now broken. Okay, I can't see what I've done now to break. Oh, it's just because of this is in the wrong order here. No, that is still broken, right? Because it starts on a Saturday. Oh, I can't see what I've done wrong. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Could you center the title and make arrows on each side to move through the calendar? Sure. So if I wanted to center the text, let's go H1 text align center. So that's no problem. The reason I can do that is that an H1 is a block level item, and therefore it takes up the full width of the page, and then I can use text align center. But then make arrows on each side to move through the calendar. Yes, that's definitely possible. Again, I would need just a bit of time to write out that JavaScript, so that wouldn't be as easy. Two, 4, 6. Thank you very much. Cheers, James. James pointed out that the padding is 10 instead of 30. There we go. Now it's all working. Okay, but just in terms of the arrows on each side. So yes, so you could create an arrow. You would listen for an event, click on that arrow, and then you would go ahead and you would change this month, and you would increase it by 1. I might be able to do that. Let's see if I don't run into other problems trying to think. Yeah, let's give it a shot. I'll just create a button next. Button. Plus equals next month. And well, then I need to create everything into a function. It might be just a bit outside the scope of kind of what we're doing here. But what you do is you'd listen for a click on that, and then you would run this again, but increase the date by 1 month. So when you go and run this for loop, you would now use the new month. So this month you would need to change to February or March, however far down the thing you go. Yeah. There's a question. You use Flex there, but you can use grids. Yeah, you can definitely use grids for this as well, and could be easier. Can try and convert it quick. So if the calendar doesn't use Flexbox, if we use display grid, then create a grid templates columns. Sorry, I mean, and we could do the same thing for what is it? Where's the weekdays? So then, yeah, you can just as well do it with grids. I don't actually know why I chose Flexbox. I think I just so used to using Flexbox. But yeah, grids is a good call, and probably make it easier to keep it responsive as well. Are there any more questions there? I'll quickly show the code for the events, but I won't go and write it all out. So what I did is I've got this add event div here, which I've set to display none, and there it is. You can see it now displayed there, but I'm just going to set it to display none. And what happens, sorry, just run this again. What happens is that it's listening for an event. So it goes and selects all of the days. What's quite important about this is that it's using a class day that I've actually created in my own HTML. So here I've gone ahead and created this class. If I try to place this before the item actually gets added to the page, it won't work. So I see this sometimes, especially in API calls, where a student tries to select something that they've added via an API call, but they do it before the API call has finished running and fetched the data. And therefore, when you try and click something, it hasn't actually been added to the page yet when you try to select it. Okay, so it goes ahead and selects these days, then adds this on click for each of the days. When that on click happens, it goes and shows the add event box. So here it goes and shows this add event box. Should probably make this display flex is what I probably want. And then when the submit button gets clicked, so I'm going to have party hit submit. So when that party gets when that event gets submitted, it goes ahead and collects what the event name was and what the event time was, and then it adds it to a span inside wherever was clicked. So it says event.target. So it goes ahead and looks at where the event happened and it adds it to wherever that event had happened. And then I just reset it, its values. Okay. Hopefully that's been a helpful thing. It's especially nice kind of getting to grips with arrays, as well as the methods you can use on dates, the date object. Any other questions there? Happy to take a few more. Is JavaScript as difficult to remember as it looks? So is it difficult to remember? It's not that difficult to remember because we have good resources online. One of the best ones is MDN. So like here, for example, I think when I was just coding this by myself, I think I wrote get year, but I actually needed to write get full year. Things like MDN tell you that. So let's go date. Right, so here on MDN, it goes and tells me what I can use. So it tells me all these methods. So I can use get date, get day, get full year, get hours, get milliseconds. Like I don't need to memorize all of this stuff. I just need to know where I should go to be able to remember the syntax and remember things like that. What's more important is understanding the logic of what you're trying to do and being able to break your project or your program down into bite-sized chunks and see how you're going to connect the dots, right? So for example, having to add these empty days. Now it's easy to go, well, how do you move this item all the way up. Well, what if I just create a whole bunch of empties? And then you're like, oh, okay, well, then I have to know how many empties to create. And that will be like whatever the first day of the month is. So just things like that. It's more about the logic, I would say, with JavaScript rather than trying to remember it all. The main things that you'll need to remember are things like how to select an element from the page, and vitally, how to console log things to be able to know what their value is. Any other questions there? I see the comment that Google will be your best friend or worst enemy. Yeah, so you just have to be careful about kind of where you're getting your information from. If I had to try and search for some of the stuff, say on W3 schools, you'd struggle and get the wrong answer from them. They're not very well maintained. But MDN, especially for things like, what's the correct name for getting your year? Is it get year? No, it's get full year. I had to get that 4 digits year. So definitely be using MDN. Cool. I think if there's no more questions there, then we can wrap up the session. I will save this. I've shared it in the chat there. But yeah, hopefully that's been interesting and helpful. And yeah, we'll chat soon, guys. Have a good day.